We are recording this. We're going to focus today's webinar on the latest activities of our migrations team. So almost got myself back together here. We're going to focus first on who Bamboo is, and then we're going to go through the challenges related to migrating from anywhere into Microsoft 365, the different options that you have there. We're then going to go through sort of the methodology that we take that you could also use for running a migration, the different tools that we use, and then we're going to give you some resources and some help that we've developed that could help you on your migration journey. So let me admit Ralph. So let's go ahead. So PC is still waking up after my reboot. Go to page 2. There we go. No, don't go to page 3. All right. So Bamboo has a full-time migration team. This is a team that's dedicated to just simply performing migrations for our customers. And those migrations take it everything from the pre-assessment to the actual migration of information from SharePoint, Exchange, Teams, from any source, whether it's Dropbox, Slack, file shares, on-prem environments. But not only taking it to the new environment, but then from there forward, connecting your users to the new environment, opening up a support desk for 5 days, and really catching all of that additional questions for the users as they start to use the new environment moving forward. Just a little bit about us. We're a provider of both software as well as services related to Microsoft 365 and SharePoint in particular. We've got over 8,000 customers. We're a Microsoft Gold partner. Most of those customers, of course, use our products. So if you split our company in half the company develops products for SharePoint. We've been doing it forever. We've now got over 26 products for SharePoint Online and Teams that are actively being used and trialed by lots of customers. A lot of those customers are also our services customers. So the services team itself can do build outs for portals. We do Dataverse solutions, Power App development, Power BI. But out of that, we ended up doing a lot of migrations, which really helped us build a specialty around how to do these migrations. So just like in the Bamboo culture, we like to provide very high value, low cost solutions, whether it's products or services for this environment. So we always like to say our experience is what makes us best in class. So we've been around for over 10 years. Last year alone, we performed over 40 migrations. So we've got a lot of experience that we wanted to capture and provide out to our customers. It's interesting. Most of those customers have gone on to use us as their support and help desk for the ongoing use of Microsoft 365. So we all know migrations are stressful and time consuming. They do require some careful planning, but there are really a lot of great tools that can assist companies like us to getting people into Microsoft 365. So it's not as complicated as a lot of people think it is. Complexity does come with size, and if we're going to be running hybrid environments, which we'll talk about, but for what we see, 5 or 10 to 200 to 300 user migrations, they can be done in a month or 2 tops, and we can get you up and running in your new environment. Getting to Microsoft 365 obviously provides lots of benefits that we're not going to get into because Microsoft touts those. But there are 3 environments that we have worked with in the past, right? So there is just a straight Microsoft 365 commercial, which most users are in. This is a shared environment that Microsoft has provided that provides you all your tools, including Microsoft Office. There are 2 other environments. One is the government cloud, and the other is the government cloud high. So if any of our customers are supporting a DoD contract and need CMMC compliance, which we'll talk to, they'll either need to go into the GCC or GCC high environment. Even if you're in Microsoft commercial, that cannot be hardened enough to meet the guidelines of CMMC that have been published. So think of CMMC as HIPAA for classified information. So if you're dealing with any CUI, you need to be in GCC. If you've got any ITAR or nuclear information, you're going to need to go into GCC high. We have been building out some data enclaves. If GCC high is if that information is a very small part of your organization. If you're not handling any GCC high information, you cannot get a GCC high tenant. If you're not handling any information that has CUI, you cannot preemptively go into GCC. Microsoft will ask for a certification of need that we can help you fill out to get a tenant assigned to you that is in the GCC or GCC high environments. The difference is between these three environments we've outlined here. So GCC high by nature is very restrictive in what you can do in that environment. So Teams acts differently, SharePoint acts differently, Search acts differently, guest access is different. And when we work with our customers, we have this information, which you'll have as part of the recording, to see, at a high level, what do you get and what don't you get in each of these environments as you move to them. All right, so this isn't a GCC high presentation, but we have a lot of experience in that. So make sure if you're going to go there that you really need to be there. And that's where the Azure Enclave may come in to keep you in GCC and put all your high information somewhere else so that you don't have all those red limitations in that environment. The three main tools that we've seen and are certified in, the first one is AvePoint Fly. This is our preferred tool for migrations for a number of reasons. The second tool is ShareGate, which is great for smaller migrations or migrations that are going to go site by site. And then, of course, there's the free Microsoft Migration Manager, which is really good for migrations once you're already in Office 365 and you want to move something else into it. All of that is generalizations, but in a sense, what AvePoint Fly will buy you is scalability. They have their normal per user per month pricing, which is great for us because if a migration only takes a month or two, we can buy you a 2-month license based on the number of users you have. They also, and then we take those licenses and we can scale the amount of data we move by using virtual machines, right? And then spreading the agents across those machines. So let's say we're moving a couple terabytes of data. You can buy the licenses and then create 20 jobs per VM that are moving different pieces of information. So if one job does fail, your whole migration doesn't fail. You can just remediate that one job and push it over. You got to watch out for throttling, which there are some tips and tricks around that. Make sure you're doing it at night and weekends. Looking at jumping service accounts is another great way to avoid throttling with AvePoint Fly so that each VM and those jobs may use different service accounts, so it's not all coming from one service account. You will need additional service accounts on your source and destination to do the migration. But what's nice is if we've seen as many as 20 VMs, each running 15 or so jobs, move terabytes of information in a very short period of time. So that's what we love about AvePoint Fly. They do have a cloud version where you would not need your own VMs, but that's currently only working tenant-to-tenant migrations. ShareGate is a bread and butter migration tool that we've used, but it does everything pretty much linearly. So if the job fails, the job fails. You can't spread it out across agents and VMs, but we use it for our smaller migrations. It's a great discovery tool as well. And it is a permanent license that's pretty inexpensive so that if your customer or if you want to continue to use the license moving forward, it's yours to keep. And we've already talked about Migration Manager, which is really good for jobs post-migration if you want to move data into SharePoint or OneDrive and the like. So that's a quick overview of what we've learned from the different migration tools out there. If there are any questions, just raise your hand and we'll see if we can answer them. We also have some consultants online that can help me with the answers if I can't answer them directly, because, you know. All right. So how do we do our migration? So here's some great lessons learned for what you can take. So there's always essentially 4 phases, right? There's the discovery, which allows us to analyze the current structure. Now that could be Dropbox, it could be just your on-prem file shares, it could be a Slack, it could be, you know, data really residing anywhere. So this is the Wild West of, you know, where is the data going to be coming from? And that discovery allows us to, using the tools from AvePoint and ShareGate, we run those against the source data, and we identify the gotchas, right? So the gotchas we'll talk about. Then we go through an enabling phase of the new tenant, right? So while we're assessing, we're setting up the new tenant, which could be just setting up site structures, file structures, but if it's in the GCC or GCC High, we'll be setting up all the controls for CMMC compliance, which is what we call our playbook, which we'll talk about. Then we perform the migration, which is moving the data into its new home. And then we deploy, right? And deploy is connecting the users, changing the DNS and moving things over. So let's go through each of these. So the data discovery, we run a query tool on all the data sources. We do a visual inspection of that output. We look at strategies around those results and potential gaps or challenges. So a lot of the gaps that we see primarily are long path names or long file names that where in the source it was okay. When you move it into SharePoint, OneDrive, or Azure, it's no longer okay. So we need to figure out how to remediate that prior to migration. We also look at permission or access issues that may come up. And also any dead data. Dead data is, you know, maybe you don't want to move it all. Maybe there's data that anything that hasn't been touched for 5 years, you just want to put into cold storage. And if you need it, you can get to it, but you don't want to clutter up your new environment with stuff you haven't. And we have seen some customers go from 6 terabytes all the way down to 1, right? And 5 of that is just old data they just never got rid of. So we want to catch all of that during this assessment phase and develop strategies around fixing that data or moving that data somewhere that the migration tool can skip it, right? Out of this, you're also going to create your timelines, which is based on what we find. So enabling the new environment. So the setting up the new tenant and the security around that is important, and that's always specific to what's happening with that migration. But what you want to make sure you realize is that the migration tools themselves are going to need accounts with SharePoint admin capabilities. So for GCC and commercial, that's easy to do because you can buy those by the month. If you're going to run 20 VMs, you're going to need 20 service accounts, but if not more, to get that large amounts of data. So you want to include that in your costs and also in your operational plan. The trouble comes in with GCC High. GCC High does not have a month-to-month plan. So if you're going GCC High, whatever, you unfortunately have to buy a 1-year license for those migration accounts, or use somebody else's that can then be transferred to them post-migration. So there's a couple strategies there, but that can get kind of expensive. So just plan for that. If you are going to GCC and we need to get you to CMMC compliance, there are some subscriptions you're going to need, such as Sentinel and the CMMC subscription. Some of these used to be included with the G5 licenses, but they're no longer included this year. So they are additional costs that need to be on there. Sentinel's not absolutely required. It's only if you need that endpoint management, but the CMMC subscription is required in order for us to run our playbook. So let's talk about the playbook. So the playbook is a security playbook that we've created. It's based on the CIS benchmarks. We're now on CIS benchmark 1.5 is the latest. There are 700 screenshots in this playbook that run through Teams, Azure, SharePoint, Exchange. Things like setting the geolocation, turning on MFA, setting up conditional access policies and rules, and all of this stuff that we run against Intune, Teams, SharePoint, Exchange, and OneDrive. We document the settings that are set to make you CMMC compliant. The ongoing compliance is not done by us. We can run that playbook once a year or whenever the CMMC guidelines change. But if you're looking for ongoing support within that realm, we have partners that can help you with that. So, this is what I just talked about. So conforming now to the CMMC level 2 compliance, which is 132 of those settings. We do provide the playbook to you as documentation that the settings were set to comply with those guidelines. And then there's the ongoing compliance is your responsibility. But it is a pretty amazing experience. It takes us somewhere between 40 and 80 hours to set the compliance levels and document what was done. We are finding a lot of customers are getting to GCC or GCCH, but they're not getting their compliance because they don't know how to set the system up to do that. Give us a call. We can run just the playbook against it. There are also best practice security settings for commercial, which we can help you with as well. So then in performing the migration, lots of data sources out there. You got to make sure you catch them all. One thing you want to look for as a best practice is don't forget about the shared mailboxes, the info at, the contracts at, the accounts payable at, the sales at, all that stuff sometimes gets missed when you're just looking for user accounts. So make sure you catch those during your migration. Once migrated, there's a lot of data remediation that needs to happen. Luckily, these tools give you lots of reports on what was successfully moved, what was not successfully moved, so that you can remediate it and then rerun that job. Once you've done the migration, don't forget people are still working in that source environment. So you're going to have to turn off that access at some point. Typically, it's the Friday before the Monday go live, and we do that for a number of reasons. One, we can then perform the Delta migrations at night and on the weekend, which is less throttling for Microsoft. But two, if we have to update the DNS, it does take 24 to 48 hours for that to propagate. With government, it's actually longer, so you may not get emails from a .gov for another 2 or 3 days after that Monday, but you will get emails everywhere else. So in order to do that DNS propagation, we always like to leave at least 48 hours. So we'll do the DNS cutover Friday night. We'll run the deltas over the weekend, and then Monday morning, our day one hypercare team will be on call, either setting up training with individual users to connect them to the new environment. If they're coming from, let's say, Google and they're going into commercial, it's less if you're going from on-prem SharePoint to there, or even SharePoint commercial to a GCC, because it's very similar. But we also open up our help desk for 5 days after go live so that we can ensure that everybody has access. So we call that the day one hypercare deployment phase. So prior to your go live, we're going to ensure that we've got the correct user list. This often happens as well, which is a real gotcha in migrations, is we'll be performing all of those pre-migrations prior to cutover weekend, but some people have been hired and you got new users that we didn't know about, right? So all the way up to the week before, we're working with you to ensure we've got the correct and current user list. The strategy for getting the workforce connected can be done a couple ways, and it really depends on the number of users in the migration. If it's under 30 or 40 users, we can do one-on-one white glove service where we set up essentially a 1 hour time block with each user across our team, and we walk them through connecting, ensuring the PC boots up, they can log in, they know where their files are, they can access their important things to get them on their way, as well as ensuring that the software is installed and downloaded to their machine. We can also do group tours, which is a great option where we can bring in 10 to 15 folks into a group tour of what the new environment looks like. And then we, of course, do a lot of documentation and forwarding of that documentation prior to go live so that they know how to use the web version of everything so that they're not relying on the desktop version if that needs to be installed after go live. But they can then get access to their Outlook and their files through office.com and the like. So lots of options. Something that really needs to be considered is what is your day one gonna look like? Everybody high fives after the migration is done, but then the users need access to it, and we don't want any downtime to getting back to work in the new environment. So once you're live in the environment, you also then need to think about how are you going to manage your new environment. And we see this often, they get migrated in there and then a year later, they're like, our permissions are all messed up. We keep adding more teams. We've got team sprawl going on. We've got all this other stuff happening. And we just want to start using this, right? We want to start building out our portals. We want to start building out automation with Power Automate and the like. So you want to find a partner or bring on some resources that can help with the actual using of the new tool that you have, right? There's SharePoint portal builds, there's Dataverse solutions, there's the Power Platform, there's ongoing end user training and support. There is governance around teams, and there's some great tools out there, but there's also just policies you can set within teams that help that out. And then there's just really help for the users that are going to happen every day. And what we noticed was the help desk for users and the monitoring of the environment becomes very critical right after the migration. So we've got a plan for that we'll talk about in a minute. So those are pretty straightforward migrations. We've been involved with some larger migrations where they want to take a hybrid approach, where rather than moving everything all at once, they want to go site collection by site collection, right? And we'll talk about those phases. But during that phase, while we're doing those smaller migrations, we're going to need a hybrid environment. That is the existing environment for a longer period of time and servicing those O&M requests, and then moving site by site the information into the cloud, right? Look, the site structure is going to change from hierarchy to flat. If you're going from, let's say, on-prem SharePoint to SharePoint Online, you're going to move from a classic experience to a modern experience. And you're going to have to get used to the cloud. So larger, and by larger, I mean we participated in a 170,000 user migration. Big enterprises. This change management needs to be figured out. We do recommend a hybrid environment. And hybrid is not just you stay on-prem until the cloud's ready. It's each department or each district or each business unit is going to move to the cloud, and that access is going to be turned off. And then we're going to work on the next unit who's on-prem. And so you're actually going to be running both environments in production simultaneously. And this allows for a gradual migration. And what's nice is that you can set up search to be hybrid so that one search will search both the on-prem and the cloud all at once. You can also run hybrid team sites and Delve integration so that all your stuff in the cloud is not only looking at what's there, but it's also looking at stuff back in your on-prem world. So we break that into phases. So the first phase we call the backbone phase. So what we like to move first in a hybrid environment is things that are enterprise-wide. So your intranet homepage and any landing pages for each of the departments, any sites that are enterprise-wide, that is ones that are used by everybody in your organization, and then the highest level sites like your division sites or director sites. We need to identify any sort of refactoring that has to happen in those sites for scripts, third-party tools or web parts, custom development. All that has to be rewritten to work in SharePoint Online. And you can either save that for a phase 3, or typically you can layer in a developer across this that supports the migration team in refactoring and understanding, can we do this in Power Automate, or do I need to write custom code in using React or something like that? So again, backbone sites first, right? Get them over there. In phase 2, we go a little one level down and we start looking at the branch or organizational sites that are specific to a team. Again, looking for any custom scripts or workflows that need to be rewritten or modified to work in SharePoint Online. And it's the same thing, but it's more like about workflows. So don't start with your lowest level sites. You want to start with the highest level sites that everybody has access to. That way people are working in both environments, which makes then the search and delve integration even more important as you move forward. So the risk factors that we typically see with these hybrid migrations, you got to establish a trust factor between your on-prem SharePoint site and SharePoint Online to facilitate that hybrid environment. You got to make sure your migration tools and VMs for the migrations have access to that on-prem through either what do you call it? Like not Citrix environments, but being able to tunnel in from the outside, or set up VMs within your environment that can connect out to the SharePoint Online. I can't think of that word. With these, we've always got to be cognizant of throttling. You're going to hit it. You got to know how to deal with it. You got to know how to reset it, and you got to know how to avoid it, because they do remember how many times you've been throttled by a specific account. Of course, your user accounts and security group creation gets more complex because it's existing in 2 locations. And then one more complication is sometimes these migrations are moving into an existing tenant, not a brand new tenant. So there are concerns there in breaking the performance of your destination tenant if it's already being used by a larger organization. And we see this mostly in the government, where a large group is going to move into the Department of Homeland Security tenant that already exists, and now we're moving this large unit into it. Other challenges is that we see is the governance related to team sites creation and the architecture to prevent sprawl. It's the fastest growing sprawl we've ever seen in the Microsoft stack is related to Teams, because not only is it creating Teams channels, but it's also creating SharePoint sites on the back end. And we see a lot of duplication. We see a lot of dead teams. We see a lot of teams that are just not live anymore. So getting governance around that quickly and getting your users trained is probably a priority. We're going to need to continue to support the on-prem SharePoint sites while we're in this hybrid environment, which includes all the O&M work and new requests for sites. So things are going to continue to change. So you have to ensure that you've got a single source of truth of what is the actual site that's live, and then kill access to the site that's no longer needed. Otherwise, you're going to just run into problems really quickly on that. So we've done a lot of these migrations. What I do want to point out to you is we have on our website launched a migration area, but we've created a migration center of excellence. So this is where you would register for it, and this is where you would log in. So if we come here, the center of excellence is creating a repository for people to get just what we've learned and a consolidated source of information around migrations. So it's broken down into a couple areas. The first one is articles that we've written about CIS benchmarks. What is a Microsoft security score and why do I need it? What's a CMMC framework? Quick reference guide to comparing the security standards within GCC. And there's a whole bunch of blogs that are refreshed every month and new ones are added. We are starting to keep what's called a live journal, and a live journal are active migrations we're involved with. And each week we're trying to capture any challenges and how we overcame those challenges. And that should become a searchable list of things that you're running into. Let's see if Bamboo ran into it and how they solved it, right? And then last thing is resources, just links and things that we found really helpful to help answer questions. So it's free. Just go ahead and register for it. And then you can access the full articles there and also get updates. So check back often because we are updating this every month. And the response has been really good to the articles as well as our enrollment. So that's a service that we're just pushing out to the community for you to have access to. For the smaller migrations, I saw there's a couple universities on here and the like. One of the interesting things that we do is we run for a lot of our migrations. I'd say the majority of them, we're doing a fixed fee migration cost. So we've got it down to such a science that we can, just based on you telling us how much mail you got, how much SharePoint data, how many users you have, how much Teams data, OneDrive data, or the sources of that data, how much Gmail, how much Dropbox, how much in your file share, we can pretty much estimate how much time it's going to take us to migrate you and perform that day one admin. As well as if it's GCC, run the playbook. So in this case, we were looking at about 900 gigs of SharePoint data, 2 terabytes of OneDrive data. This was a commercial tenant to a GCCH high migration that we did. So running the data discovery, analysis, strategy, and planning, preparing, configuring, and migrating data to the new tenant, running a proprietary playbook to ensure the new tenant is CIS CMMC compliant. Day one hypercare for about 150 full-time employees and 350 email only employees. Help desk for the first 5 days after. That whole price was under 20K fixed fee, which we know is one of the best prices out there for migrations because we've seen other companies do this, and it can be 2 to 3 times as much, and they're hourly. But we have this dedicated team. We've done over 40 migrations. We really think we can add a significant value to our customers by getting them into that environment quickly. The day one hypercare after, we charge on a per user basis, or if it's a small amount, we include it in there. And we're running as low as $15 per user to get those users up and running. So for roughly 500 users, we're at like $7,500 for our help desk. So really competitively priced. Other costs that you need to think about outside of our migration cost, the migration tools, we just pass through those costs to our customers. AvePoint Fly is about $3 per user per month. Typically we use around 2 months. How many VMs we're going to run depends on how much data is there. So in this case, we were looking at about 4. They're running about $20 a month. Your Microsoft licenses will help you with that purchase through our relationship with Synex, but those costs are yours. Any additional service accounts we need for those migrations are an extra. We'll put a cap, right? We'll believe you on how much data you have, and we'll put that in the agreement. But if we find a lot more data, there may be more costs associated with it. So that happens after the discovery. And also the data cleanup. We'll report back to you how much data cleanup needs to happen, and that's your responsibility. We can do it. We'll put aside a certain number of hours to do that data cleanup, but if it's a lot that's needed, we can either do it for you as a separate statement of work or just let you work your way through it in shortening the file names and the paths as needed. Last but not least, before we wrap this up, we're just at about 34 minutes, so I got a couple more minutes left. Once you're there, what we've noticed is that actually using and managing and ensuring you stay secure becomes a skill set that you don't have. So what we've created is a program called Bamboo Microsoft 365 Plus. And this allows us to do security, compliance, and endpoint management for you and your team members. Azure Active Directory and Exchange Management, SharePoint and Teams, helping you with Microsoft applications and customization configuration. So really we become your help desk as well as a proactive support for what's happening in your environment. So our help desk becomes open to you and all your end users. We'll do some things proactively, and other things will be driven by tickets, such as we'll monitor and manage access to your SharePoint domain. If you need to create or decommission site collections, we can do that just through opening a ticket, managing permissions groups and use of permissions within those groups, installation of third-party applications, Teams and access, managing Teams channels, adding sites, documentations, and applications, and any training needs that you may have are all included. In the mobile side, we can make sure everybody's got syncing going on between OneDrive and their mobile devices, managing permissions, access to your Office apps within your mobile device, shared mailboxes with an Exchange, and the like. And what you can see is this is all things that already exist within your subscription that we want to make sure you're making the most use of. From a security side, we'll be looking at monitoring your sign-ins and audits, any suspicious sign-ins, geolocations. If you've got onboarding and offboarding of employees, we'll help you with that, with permissions and getting them set up. Name changes and password resets, roles and permissions managements, and the list goes on. And really what we are is like a managed service provider, but only for things related to Microsoft 365. And this way, we can ensure that your security score stays up. We run active reports each week and each month that we review with you. And we are monitoring all of this information so that you don't have to, so that you can continue to do the work that you need. We also offer a nice discount on our services rates for any SharePoint portal builds, Power Automate, our own products, Power Apps or Dataverse solutions. So we can also do those build outs with the team at a discounted rate at $155 an hour versus our standard rate of $170 while you're under this program. And access to a whole slew of team members that have different skill sets. So you could hire a single admin, but will they know Power BI? Will they know the security piece? Will they be able to do help desk support? It's really more work than one person could do, and the like. So very responsive. Great program highlights here. I won't go into them all. This is the weekly and monthly reporting that we do. We'd happy to review this with you if you're interested in it and help you on your Microsoft 365 journey. So I am about out of steam. I've talked nonstop. My mouth hurts. But if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And we will provide a recording of this for you all for your review and sharing with your team. So I'll stay online for a little bit and answer any questions that you may have. All right, if there's no questions, we'll wrap this up. And thank you for your time today, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.